Hello, I'm Matt and I'd like to welcome you to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over some of the nuances that I've learned over the last 2 years with this Woodmaxx FM78H Flail Mower. But before I get started, and before I come over here and pull a few things apart to show you some things that I've learned, I figured I'd take you around and show you some different things on our property that I've worked on over the last 2 years with this flail mower, to give you some kind of a realistic idea of what you might get if you decide to buy one. Now this section that you see here is typically what the woods look like, or most of the pine forests that we have look like when we first bought the property. And since then I've done a bit of work with the flail mower to clean it up. I did some of the work with the Exmark zero turn before I got the flail mower, but I'm going to take you around and show you kind of, the transformation that you go through to clean something like this up to make it look like what I'll show you here at the end. I'm going to walk down through a section that I worked on, and I've just ran over this once with the grapple and flail going in and then once coming back out. So you can have an idea of what you might expect. As you can see here, I've got some wood here that I went over with the flail mower, and if you look you can see that it pushed it over and just kind of ground it off, and it didn't get rid of the whole piece. That's some of what you can expect with just typically, I'm pretty sure that this was just one pass here. But even if you get more passes, sometimes they just flop over and go underneath the flail mower and you don't chew them all up quite like you'd like to. That pine tree was a little bit bigger than they recommend that you cut with the Woodmaxx flail mower. But let's go on down through here and give you a little bit better idea. It's nice seeing all the deer tracks. Kind of get an idea what you can do with it. In some areas I'll take and pull the smaller trees out with the grapple before I flail with it, and sometimes it chews them up, sometimes it lays them down like you saw there. But here's some more of what it didn't chew up. Some more laid down. Because it's a side shift, you can kind of get off to one side and lay some of these, bigger saplings down, or you can push them over with a bucket, or in my case, I'm using a grapple to do so. But when you do that, they don't necessarily all go away. Sometimes you still have to come back with the grapple and do some cleanup. But you can see where it's not really, the saplings aren't that thick. This section here in front of me right here started off looking like that. I did have to go kind of slow because that is an awful lot of stuff to put through the mower at one time. And there's all sorts of junk in the yard that you can't possibly see until you get through it with the flail mower and the grapple. You definitely don't want to mow backing up with the flail mower, as it has a big warning sign that says that damage will occur if you mow going backwards. But if you back up and then drop the flail mower down and pull forward like I did in this spot, it seems to work pretty good. This section here was just one pass coming out, going over it with the grapple and then coming out with the flail mower on. I picked it up here because you can see that it didn't clean it all up. It was probably binding up a little bit on the dirt that was there, because that's one thing that will kind of bog it down. As you can see, it doesn't always get everything. I must have had it lifted up until I got past this tree here, because it's not knocked down like it normally is. Must have forgot to put it back down. But here it's back down, and you can see how clean it makes, a cut when it's, stuff that's really small enough that it can just eat up. There's a few deer tracks if you like deer. Now this section here I'm going to walk through is just a section that was just gone over with the grapple. And it hasn't been flail mowed yet. It's a section that my dad did. I don't want him using the flail mower because he has some lung issues, and I don't want him breathing all that dust. And we'll talk more about the dust with that flail mower here shortly, because it's something you have to be concerned about with your health, as well as the use of the tractor, because all that dust getting into the filter on the front and on your grill can cause your tractor to overheat. And this section here that I'm walking through, I've gone over that with the grapple and the flail mower twice, once in and once coming back out, down the right side, turn around and come back. So I'm using the side shift as I come down through. And as you can see, you got some trees that are down. You look at this, you can see that the flail mower went over it and flattened off one side, but didn't eat it all up. So the flail mower really isn't truly it's not a forestry tool, even though I'm kind of using it somewhat like a forestry tool at some points. This is actually, I think it's actually this row or the next row, where the flail mower decided to eat my camera after the camera decided to jump off of its mounted point. But it's still amazing how I was able to recover a camera thanks to the Lord's blessings. But you can see here, it doesn't chew everything up. It's kind of hard to get up against everything when you're coming through the woods. And even some of the smaller saplings like this one here, it pushed it over and, flattened out one side, but didn't totally eat it up. One of the things that you have to be careful with, because I had a whole bunch of downed trees, was when you're using the grapple to push the trees down the row, sometimes they'll slide off on the side and end up just parallel with the row, and you can't really get to them real great, especially when you're doing the flail mowing. But you have to watch for spots like this where there's a piece of wood, and make sure you lift up the flail mower and go over the top of it, because if you run into that with the flail mower, it's probably going to come to a pretty hard stop. I have stalled the flail mower a couple of times by finding pieces that I didn't see in the debris and it getting stuck up underneath the flail mower. Fortunately, it hasn't broken anything, but it's something to pay attention to and be concerned about. And we'll walk down the rest of this little row so you can kind of see what one pass looks like, or one pass down and one pass back. And as you can see, it's kind of wet out here right now. This section here will give you another good example of, it pushes things over and doesn't necessarily cut it all the way off. And I've gone over part of this with the zero turn as well, chewing up some of it. But I'll have to come back through with the saw and cut off some of those bigger parts to get rid of them. But this is after going over it twice with the flail mower and then coming back with the zero turn and cutting off what I could with that. I try to cut up as much as I can with the equipment before I get out the brush cutter for my weed eater, because that takes an awful lot of work just to do one row. Section like this will take me a good hour or so just to do one row with the brush cutter on the weed eater. And then some of it's just too big for the brush cutter on the weed eater. Some of that I cut off with the tree pruner. I like to use the Milwaukee handheld tree pruner, and I've got a Ryobi pole pruner that I use that I've got in a previous review. They work pretty well, but you can't get, to move in and out for each one of these with the flail mower, side shifting in and out. One, you're not going to get it all, and two, it really slows you down to try to get around each one of these trees with it. So this smaller stuff, I'll just come back through with the brush cutter on my weed eater and chew it up. And it'll take a few passes and it'll take a few different cuts out here before I get it really the way I want. And I'm going to take you around and show you what I'm looking to get it to is going to look like. Now this section here I've gone over multiple times with the zero turn lawnmower and the brush cutter on the weed eater. And this is really where I'm heading to with it. It's still not perfectly cleaned up, but each time I go around and mow the grass and clean it up a little bit more, it gets a little bit better. Yeah, I've got a few stumps left to get out, but I'll get the stump bucket out here and pull them out. I don't like to leave them in the ground because I really don't like hitting them with the mower when I'm mowing with a zero turn. It's really hard to make sure you get them cut down far enough. And then even if you do, you still end up with a hole right where the stump was. As the stump deteriorates, you still end up with a hole that you keep having to fill in. So I'd much rather just get it pulled out and filled back in with dirt, so I don't have to keep filling it in every year because the stump's deteriorating and the ground is getting lower. But that's what it's going to look like here on the other section, hopefully by next year, because I can only do so much of this at one time. I still have other things that I have to get done in life, as I'm sure all of you know and have to do in your lives. But this will give you kind of an idea what you can do with a grapple, a flail mower, and a zero turn, and a brush cutter on your weed eater. It's not as good as a forestry tool. I could come in here and chew a lot of this stuff up with a forestry tool, but I'm not quite to that point with my life right now. But someday I want to play with a forestry tool and kind of see how it goes. Now to go over a few things that I've had break on the flail mower. I don't know why, but with this tractor, I've had this center link pin get broke once and fall out a couple of times. I'm not really sure why it's doing that with this tractor, because it never did it with the 2605H, but it has been doing it with the 2860E, and I really don't understand why. Another thing that is broke is if you come down here to this bracket, you'll see there are 4 bolts on this side. There are 4 more bolts on the other side. And one day when my dad was using it, he evidently didn't have the flail mower lifted up when he was going backwards or backed into something pretty hard, and broke 6 of the bolts off, 6 of the 8 bolts that are there. There was one holding on each side, and the other downside to that was the drive shaft that was on it ended up looking like a banana, and it doesn't work so good like a banana. But it's $280, to have it shipped from Woodmaxx, and we were able to get it shipped. It took a couple of days to get it here, but it's just one thing to keep in mind. And one of the things I'm going to start doing is taking the flail mower off of here and putting the box plate on when I'm not using it, so that I have less of a chance of breaking something expensive, because there really isn't anything on the box blade you can break. I do like to have something on the back for a bit of a counterbalance, and I'd kind of rather run into some things with the box blade than the back of the tractor and take a chance of bending something up on the tractor. Now the flail mower deck lid has a bolt on either side that looks just like this. When it shows up from the factory, it just has one nut on it. Now when I originally got this flail mower, it was actually missing one of these bolts, so I found something that would work. And initially they just had one nut on them. And when I put a bolt in it with just one nut, inevitably the bolt loosens up and it falls off and you lose it. So after that, I decided to get a bolt that had that was only threaded part way, so I could lock the NiClad nut up against the shoulder of the unthreaded part of the bolt. And it seemed to work when I first put it on, but after I mowed for a little while, those disappeared as well. The best luck that I've had is by using a NiClad and a regular nut and then locking them together using the impact. And since I've been doing that, I haven't had it come apart or lose it. And you may wonder, this deck lid is pretty heavy, but when I opened it up, if you see all the paint that's wore off the underside of that deck lid, I really don't think you'd want it to come open if you hit something that, was powerful enough to come up, through there. I'd much rather have the bolts on it so I don't have to worry about it. So we're going to pull this part off, and I'll continue on from there. And with a lock nut, if you spin the outside one off just a little bit with the impact, then you can put the wrench, which is a 3/4 inch wrench, on both nuts and spin them both off relatively quickly. And there's a washer up here, and there's another washer on the other side. And I usually pull them off and I just toss them up here. Now we'll go over to the other side. Yep, cut that up with it. So it don't take really long to get the bolts off of it so you can service it. You really do want to check this thing because bolts on the blades do have a tendency to loosen up. And I'm going to strap the lid up with a bungee cord. I usually either use a bungee cord that I keep in the back of the tractor, or I use a ratchet strap, because this lid is quite heavy and you don't want it to fall in your arms. Here I'm strapping the lid up with a bungee cord, but I neglected to move the camera so you could see what I was doing. But that's what I'm doing. Okay. Now we can look in here. And as you can see, I have hammer blades on this. And they all look like they're still pretty tight. I'm going to go down through and tighten them all up just to make sure before I use it for this next time. So I'm going to move the camera over here. And try it. That looks like a pretty good angle. These are 7/8 SAEs. And if it comes up tight with this, it's usually pretty tight. But I'll check it by hand, but this is a quick way to spin them all up. Yeah, that one was a little loose. I don't like to use the impact on this because these ears right here, they're kind of soft. If you use an impact on them, you may want to bend over, and I'd hate to break one off and have to weld it back up. But there's 4 sets of teeth, and I'm going to go through and tighten them all up. And it only takes a few minutes. I'll run the tape for the whole thing, but I won't make you watch the whole thing, or maybe I'll speed it up. Come up, bounce for the next one to come up. And one loose. And that one loose. That one feels good. That was a little loose. Now I will use an impact to spin them off if I'm going to change them, as I do get them dinged up a little bit. These are looking pretty good right now. I just took, I think I had like 8 of them that were nicked up. I'll show you this one here, kind of give you an idea what it looks like. Yeah, that's kind of a corner one that's dinged up. That one looks pretty good. Now this one here I'm going to bring down is the one I've had break bolts a couple of times. And it's not the mower's fault that I break bolts with it. Typically when I break a bolt on this side, which has only happened twice, I've been cutting a sapling that's a little bit too big. I was about to close this up and button it up, but I decided I'd go ahead and change that one that's got the corner broke off that I showed you a few minutes ago, just to show you how easy they come off. I'm about to lose my pen out of this. It's not so great. Probably get in there without the universal, but it's a lot easier with the universal when the universal's not breaking. But as you can see, get this where you can see it, the corner's pretty eaten up on that, so I'm going to go ahead and put one on it that isn't eaten up. I don't like to spin them on with that because I really don't want to take a chance of bending that ear, because that could be a pain. So I'll spin it the rest of the way up by hand until I can feel it's tight, because I'd hate to screw up that ear. But this is nice. The ratchet's nice for checking them all. Beats the heck out of just using a couple wrenches, especially if you got one that's a little loose, because it buttons it up really quickly. But that's really all you have to do to change them. This is 2 sets from the same factory, so I'm not worried about balance being off because they came from the factory. So now I'll show you how it buttons up. Just to give you an idea how heavy this thing is. You really wouldn't want that to fall on your hand. So what I do is I start on one end, and that's got a washer on it there. And then slip the washer back on it. Put the nut that's not a lock nut on there. And then I put the lock nut on after I get enough threads there, silly old man. Put that back and forward. And once they're where they're touching, I'll use the wrench on both of them to pull it up tight. Then I'll get the outside one and give it a couple twists. And I haven't had any of them come off since I've been doing that, but I have had them come off before I started doing that. So now we're going to go do the other end. When I first got this thing, I kind of put off checking the blades each time I used it because I thought it was a pain, but once I started using the impacts on it, it became so easy it wasn't worth not checking them. Just get you where I want you. Of course, when I'm videotaping it, don't want to help. There we go. And that'll stay there just like that. Now if you look, this here's a little bent, and I got to get it bent back out, but it's still rolling. It does kind of go up against the little roller a little bit, and I do have to get that bent back out, which is something I'm going to work on probably either tomorrow or the next day. Now I'll go on to show you how to check the gear oil and where it goes, and that's going to take a couple minutes because I got to take a couple things apart. Now in order to check the gear oil, you got to take this shroud off and another one that's underneath of it. I just did it recently, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it off so you can see where you'd have to get to. These bolts you don't have to pull all the way out because the shroud has a U shape on it. I'll show you that in a minute. So it's made to where you can kind of get it off relatively quickly when it wants to cooperate. Yeah, gotta loosen it up just a little more. Well, didn't want to loosen it up that hard. But as you can see, it has like U shapes to where you can just put it down and slip it over the nuts when they're part way in. It's a little bit, because it's a little bent, it's a little entertaining to get on. Then there's this shroud back here. It's held on with 2 bolts. And there's a washer on them. I'll set them here. And that shroud comes off. Just pay attention to which holes those bolts go in. And then I'll have to bring the camera over here so you can see where the gap is. Get a light out. And in order to check the fluid, or when you first fill it, you got to pull this sight bolt out. And it's down underneath here. I really can't get the camera quite in the right spot. But that's an 8mm. There you go. And that's an 8mm Allen wrench. You put that in. You take the little bolt out. It's an Allen wrench bolt. And then this cap up here, get me back a little bit more. This cap right here, you pull that cap off, and that's where you fill it from. I've already checked it and filled it up, so I'm not going to pull it all the way apart, but I thought I'd take a few minutes and show you, where it's at, in case you don't know or don't have the manual. Though all the manuals are really easy to find on their website. When I had this overheating, I decided to double check everything. So I went through and put more gear oil in it. I really don't think it required any, but I wanted to make sure, just because I didn't want to ruin the thing. So now I'll take a couple of minutes and put it back together. Slide it out the last time I was doing this. Yeah, I gotta get on the other side. There we go. A little bit tricky to get back on because it's a little bent. And then the washers want to get where you don't want them. It's got a lock washer and a flat washer, and have a tendency to get on the wrong side. See if I got those on the right side. Nope. There we go. And those are both on the right side. Just pushes down on. And then once again, put it back up. Okay, she's all back together. The only other thing that's broke on this is right there. There used to be a manual holder, and one of my mean old trees or bushes or something in the forest decided to remove it. Fortunately, the manual wasn't in it, but that's really the only other thing that's broken since I've had it. Here's a short clip of the flail mower in action, and at the end of this clip you'll hear the flail mower change tone, and this is when one of the bolts broke on one of the blades. I use our equipment in a manner that I am comfortable with. Please ensure you follow all manufacturer's instructions of the equipment and tools that you use, because failure to do so could lead to serious bodily injury or death. Initially, I thought that it broke when I used the side shift, but going back and watching the video, I was just going straight when the bolt broke, because you can hear the hammer blade rattling around in the background. I wish I'd have gotten a little better video of fixing it, but I'm going to show you a picture of the bolt here in just a minute. And here's a picture of the two bolts that broke that held the hammer blades in place. If you'll note, they both broke right at the threads. One of the other things I wanted to see is how much actual movement you have in it, because when I'm using it in the woods, it seems like I lose a little bit in the linkage of the tractor. So I've got a tripod set up tight against here where I've got it all the way out. And I'm going to take a quick measurement on the piston here, or on the rail here. And looking at that, it should move about 13.5 inches from what I can see where the oil's been wiped off. I kind of wanted to see how much you actually get out of it, because it doesn't seem like it's that much movement when you're in the woods. So I'm going to start it up, and then I'll bring you back once I get it moved over. Well, looking at that, I'm only losing about 3/4 of an inch in the travel, but it sure seems like a lot more than that when you're using it in the woods, because it's really hard to get around trees with it the way you think you can. And when I looked at the stats online, I thought it was moving 18 inches side to side, but it's only moving 13.5 inches from what I can see on the cylinder here. And in that, I'm only getting about a 12 3/4 inch net with the linkage. So you got to have some space around the tree in order to drive past it. So it's really, you're only getting, if you got 3 or 4 inches you take that away from that and you're only getting 7, 8, maybe 9 inches around the tree. So it doesn't work quite as well as I thought it would that way. But I still like it, and I still think it's a good tool, and I'm glad I bought it. And if there's a better tool out there and you know a better tool that would work better for getting around these trees, please let me know in the comments section. As a note, I'm trying a few different formats for doing these videos. Some of them I just do video of the equipment working, and then I do voiceovers. And this one here I'm doing a more hands-on with the camera and trying to show you a few things while I'm at it. I am going to add a little bit of video in from some of the things I talked about, while we were walking around. But please let me know which format you like better. Do you like just the voiceover, showing the equipment working? Do you prefer a little bit more information, on camera like this? Or would you like a combination of the two? Let me know in the comments. I'd like to get better at this. I enjoy bringing you content, and it's a lot easier to bring you good content when I get a little feedback from you. Alrighty, that's basically my recap of this Woodmaxx Flail Mower. It's worked pretty well for me. Like I said a few minutes ago, if you know of a better piece of equipment, let me know. This one's worked great. I've only broken 2 bolts, had one come out. My dad backing into something, we broke some other bolts, but that can be expected of anything. You do have to make sure you lift it up if you're backing up, because if you hit something hard, it did shear 6 bolts off and tear up the drive shaft. I had kind of thought about shortening the drive shaft a little bit on each end, just in case the bolts get sheared off again. And if you've tried that, please let me know in the comments section. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you will know when we upload a new video. If you have a friend that may enjoy this video, please share. If you have a question or a comment, please leave it in the comments section, and I will get back with you as soon as possible. Thanks again for watching, and may you have an awesome day.